I am here as ever with my good friend Richard. Hello, Richard.
Andy, great to be back. How are you doing?
Yes, we're fine. We're pressing on. It's all good.
Excellent, excellent.
Now, last time we chatted about red hair, and fascinatingly, you didn't come back and say, yeah, it's all basically silly nonsense. Actually, you came back and said, there's some actual research behind the fact that people with red hair respond to anesthetic differently, which I found genuinely perplexing and fascinating.
Yes, indeed. And medicine, and the body is perplexing and fascinating. Just when we think we've got it all sussed, boy, have we not?
No, exactly. Because I put it to you and I thought, where's this one going to go? Maybe you'll get a little anecdotal thing, but I wrote it down because there's one of the ones that just keeps on getting me. Pale skin is more likely if you have red hair, and that's a problem for cancer, skin cancer. But actually, people with red hair also produce more vitamin D naturally, which then works against any potential cancer. I just think the way God has designed us to be is just mind-blowingly cool.
It is, and what I love about as a sort of a medic who's also a Christian is that the more we discover about of medicine, the more we discover God's amazing design and how, in other words, God's thought these thoughts well in advance, and yeah, so yeah, praise God.
I was chatting with a lady from the States. Sherry is her name. She's a marine biologist. And part of her faith journey is looking at science. I think it was at university. She was looking at the hydrological cycle, which is the bit where the water comes down as rain, goes back, evaporates, and back in circles. And that was part of her conversion faith story because she said, this is phenomenal what God has done. It has to be God.
To put it down to random chance, and time again, the more you discover, whether it's the hydrological cycle or the red hair thing that you've just mentioned, honestly, please, this is design from
Amen.
an intelligent designer.
Absolutely. I have one question before you each week, before we get into
Yes.
today's thing. Okay, so I remember this one now. Yes, this was a fun chat. This was a fun chat in the family sent in by my wife. I have a question for Dr. Scott. We got talking about this on Family Focus show, which is last week, and we decided we needed to ask our in-house doctor, what is it with cuticles? What are they for? What are they? Why is it that some people's cuticles are clear to see, some people's are not? Should we use a cuticle device and lotion to see them, or is that bad for you? Why do people want to see cuticles? Jojo says, just a few questions on the subject. Appreciate some clarity on these cuticle issues, which came out of the fact that one day, I think it was one of Joe's sisters, was looking at my hand and said, "Oh, you've got lovely cuticles. What do you do?" And I said, "What's a cuticle?" But what do you do? I don't even know what they are. I mean, I do now, but apparently I have lovely cuticles. But she was doing these like things of pushing down the skin. I'm thinking, why would? So, as with Joe, what is a cuticle and what's it for?
That's more of a sort of social thing than a medical thing. Medically, we talk about nails. And we don't divide them up into, if you like, the end of the nail, the main body of the nail, and the cuticle at the base of the nail. So we really talk about nails, nail growth, nail diseases. So I couldn't really answer you just in terms of cuticles. There are plenty of diseases that affect one's nails, and in fact, if you're really sharp as a doctor, you can look at people's nails and think, "Aha, that is a clue as to what's going on elsewhere."
Wow.
But other people have sort of brittle nails that keep cracking. My wife, for example, for no good reason, she's perfectly healthy. We don't know why it happens. Why some people have got tiny cuticles, as I have, and others have got more bold cuticles, perhaps as you have. That's just individual variation. It doesn't reflect good health, bad health. It's just individual variation, I think. And we could say they're very beautiful. Well, how lovely for you. I'll take a beautiful face, which I haven't got, over beautiful nails.
Well, it was one of those
But there
fascinating
we are.
things. And I looked and thought, why? I mean, it's a woman's beauty thing. I was told this going back 25 years, and they use this stuff of pushing back the end of the finger flesh,
Yeah,
and I just think,
there's no real logic behind that, really. I mean, certainly people do refer to them as beautiful, and I think particularly for women, it's much more important to have nice nails than for men. But it's not really a medical thing. It's an individual variation, the size of the cuticle.
I think one of Joe's questions was, should we be forcing back the flesh from the nail?
Oh, we shouldn't.
No.
That's not. Why would you want to do that? You're only doing that beautiful, for beauty reasons, if you wish to do so. But you'll just cause yourself sore skin, and then the skin will regrow. And what's the point?
So just coming back on one thing you said, if you're looking at nails, it can tell you health conditions. The only thing I think of is vitamin C deficiency that you can see in nails. That's about my knowledge.
there's a whole load of conditions you can see from liver disease to people sometimes have very prominent round blue nails, which reflects heart disease, congenital heart disease, congenital lung disease. There's a
Wow.
whole range of things that you can tell from nails. Very pale nails will reflect anemia. There's a range. Jaundice people sometimes have coloured nails. There's a whole range of things. But there we are. That's a whole subject. But that's disease. That's pathology. Whereas cuticles really are, yeah, it's that's beauty.
Dare we say it's a vanity issue?
I
I'll
think
say
so.
that carefully. I'm asking the question, therefore I'm not making the statement. Okay, so this week's topic, what have we got? This comes back from our last chat, doesn't it?
It does. We've somehow strayed onto acupuncture. I'm not entirely sure how, but I think it was to do with pain relief and red hair last week. And yes, it sort of got us both thinking. I remembered that many years ago, maybe 15 years ago, I was asked to do a very brief talk. Or in fact, I think I volunteered in my practice because one of our doctors from South Africa has had a sideline in acupuncture. And she was very interested in pain to the extent that actually she stopped being a general practitioner, family practitioner in America, to become a full-time pain doctor, where acupuncture is particularly, part of what she offers to patients. So I did a talk because we were thinking, well, there's two types of acupuncture, Western and Eastern, and as a Christian practice, we don't really want Eastern acupuncture, we don't think. But Richard, could you look into it? So I did. Sadly, I've lost my notes, so I had to go looking again. And in fact, so I want to really do a little blurb tonight on acupuncture. Is it acceptable for Christians? What about its Eastern roots? Does it work? Obviously, that's important. And in short, should Christian practice take it on? And what might our listeners find of value? Those people who aren't doctors are having to introduce their practice. Okay, but what about acupuncture for Christians? So I contacted the Christian Medical Fellowship, of whom I'm a member, for articles, and there was plenty. And they did a particularly big article in 2004, so 20 years ago, and then I've done a little bit of an update since then. So here's the overview. Acupuncture is one of the most popular alternative health therapies. I think we will know that. And what is it? Well, it simply involves inserting needles into the skin at specific points. You can't just go needling anywhere. And that's something we'll look at later, by the way, in order to treat disease, and this is what I didn't realize, it's not just a treatment, but to promote good health. So it's a prevention as well as a cure. Didn't know that. So it's been used in many NHS practices, including ourselves, and especially in pain clinics. It's increasingly respectable. There are societies. There's the British Acupuncture Council, I learnt, for non-medical practitioners, and the British Medical Acupuncture Society for doctors who practice acupuncture. There we go. A couple of things I've learned. And they're thinking about a UK regulatory body. Training courses. This is interesting. Do you know you could be trained in acupuncture from just a few weeks, in fact, even a few weekends, up to 2 years in England. So you can have a lengthy training or a short one. But in China, where acupuncture sort of started, do you know training takes 6 to 10 years, like being a doctor, just in one discipline to get it right and to be super good at it. So that's interesting, is it? 6 to 10 years. Now, what were the origins? I always like looking at the origins of things, and this is interesting, a bit like we did with cold water dips, if you remember.
Huh.
Well, from archaeology, the evidence shows that acupuncture was practiced in the Stone Ages and the Bronze Ages, so tens of thousands of years ago. In China, it's been spotted more than 3,500 years ago. And there was a first textbook. Isn't it interesting? The Chinese so ahead of us. 500 BC, so 2,500 years ago, there was a textbook mentioning acupuncture. And a bit further forward in 250 AD, there's the textbook called The Classic of Acupuncture. So, that's a long time ago, 1750 years ago, nearly 2,000 years ago. There was a whole textbook on acupuncture in China. And it's remained part of course, traditional medicine in China for centuries. When was it introduced into? Oh, let me test you out, Andy. Completely unfair question, but why not? This will just amuse our listeners when you get it wrong. When was acupuncture introduced into Europe, do you think? See how close you can get.
You see, I'm thinking it's probably the Romans. So I'm thinking like when they came, because they brought us roads and stuff.
There's all sorts of things.
I would go back to the time of the Romans.
So early AD, really,
Yeah.
in those cases. Yeah. No, in fact, it's much later than that. That's a
Oh,
very reasonable point. But 1683, there was
okay.
a Dutch physician introduced it into Europe. It's mentioned in the Lancet, so one of Britain's most sort of proper medical magazines in 1823 as a treatment for rheumatism, and there's been increasing interest since. So 1683 into Europe, 1823 gets a mention in a proper English medical journal. So what it's all about. So in the Chinese acupuncture, we'll start off with that. It's based on Taoism, the religion of Tao, and incorporates its concept of a life force or qi. So the listeners can remember qi. This is important if we're going to understand a subject. So there's a life force within Taoism called qi, C-H-I, that pervades all life forms and which flows freely. I have to say that with otherwise that's a bit of a tongue twister. It flows freely through the body in normal health. So we've got this life force flowing through us. Qi has two components. Your listeners and our listeners will have heard about this: yin and yang. Yin is a negative force and yang is a positive force. And it circulates throughout the body, but particularly through 12 main channels or meridians. So you've got, like, if you like, lines through the body, these 12 meridians. And when qi is in balance, the body is healthy. If it's out of balance or blocked, where ill health results. And there are specific points relating to these meridians. There's actually 365 points described. So these are the needling points that acupuncturists go for if they're particularly into Chinese medicine. 365 points connected to these 12 main meridians, which will hopefully restore health. And this is interesting. The needles can either go in shallowly, and I've had this acupuncture for calf conditions, ankle conditions, elbow conditions from my own personal physio. They can go in shallowly, which is 1 to 2 millimeters, or deep, 5 to 60 millimeters. 6 centimeters. That's more than 2 inches.
That's
quite deep. That's so-called deep needling. There could be twiddling of the needles. My physio would do that. She would twiddle the needles until, that's hit a point. That's okay. That's going to work. And you can do electrical stimulation as well attached to it. There's more details should we wish to get into it. There's special ear acupuncture. You can even do self acupuncture if you know what you're doing. And sometimes it's linked in with diet as well. So it's a bit more complicated than I'm making it. Question is this. That's Chinese acupuncture, 365 needling points, meridians, etc. Is there any rational scientific basis behind it for our Western listeners? And to be honest, there's no supporting evidence. There's no supporting evidence for the existence of qi or meridians. There's no link to anatomy. There's no link to nerve cells. There's no link to blood. And histology, which means taking biopsies, electrophysiology, has not localized any acupuncture points. That doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means that we can't prove it scientifically. So that's the Chinese stuff. What about Western medical acupuncture, which I've had by my physio, and which we agreed in our practice to bring in because the lady we tested, we had a good conversation with her. Are you doing this as Eastern Chinese acupuncture? Because if you are, we're not having it in our practice. Or is it simply Western? And she said it's Western, fine. In that case, you can practice. That's what we agreed personally. So while Western acupuncturists have tried to distance themselves from this sort of Taoist roots, and it's based on 3 theories, and this is where Western acupuncture goes, and we can understand this, I think, as Westerners. Number 1, there's the gate control of pain. Now, this is what we were taught as medical students all these years ago. There's a gate control theory in which needles are modifying how we feel pain. They close a pain gate in the nervous system. And it's a bit like counter irritation. In other words, you cause some pain somewhere else, which takes your mind off the pain that you're suffering. And needles say I'm having acupuncture in my arm to affect pain in my calf. What's happening in the arm through this gate control theory is taking my mind off what's happening in my leg. That's one possibility. The second one is an opioid theory. The needles are liberating endorphins, and we've looked at endorphins previously, through caffeine, etc. That's the second possibility, is that needles are liberating pain relievers. And thirdly, that it may actually be dealing with the conditions themselves, whether it's fibrositis or other inflammations. It's a bit woolly, this one. There's no definite idea, but no definite evidence, rather. But these are 3 possibilities. Maybe it's the needles are closing a pain gate elsewhere, or they're liberating endorphins, or somehow they're having another effect on painful conditions. So here we go. Does it work? Well, I think I mentioned to you, Andy. I can't remember whether I mentioned to the listeners. I remember being in Nepal and seeing eye surgery done under acupuncture.
Mhm.
No general anesthetic, no local anesthetic, acupuncture with a needle going in deep alongside the eye and into the brain. And I thought, oh, and then the eye surgery patient was lying there awake, absolutely able to stand their eye surgery. Of course, we couldn't that couldn't happen to anyone if pain relief wasn't adequate. I've seen it work. I may not understand how it works, and I have to say beforehand I was skeptical. Afterwards, I'll be honest, I was a believer. Because you can't imagine, you can possibly imagine, I don't know, having a foreign body taken out of your arm by just gritting your teeth. Not eye surgery. That's not possible. So I've seen it work. Um, And to be fair, acupuncture is probably the most researched of all the alternative therapies. And that's a bit surprising because although it's had all this research, we've never found any proof of its efficacy, why it works. Lots of randomized control trials, but there we go. And here's the thing there has been an investigation showed possible benefit in dental pain, in low back pain, in nausea and vomiting, but not in other conditions. There's been 10-year reviews, trials, what we call meta-analyses, putting together, hundreds or thousands of trials at Exeter University. And there's been a little bit of evidence that it helps certain conditions, but not in others, and can make some conditions worse. Here's a really interesting thing I found, and you'll like this one. There's a
Mm.
thing called sham acupuncture, where you pretend to do acupuncture. Patients are shown a needle. If you like, they close their eyes and then the needle is taken away. It doesn't puncture the skin. Sham acupuncture, in one study, 100% of pain sufferers benefited. Acupuncture has not taken place, but they've seen the needle. And what they concluded in this study was that both acupuncture and sham acupuncture were good placebos rather than the real deal. And the conclusion was yes, you can use it in primary care, whether you use acupuncture or sham acupuncture, even though there's no convincing evidence for either. Not sure about that. Is it safe? Well, some studies say no. There have been at least 50 fatalities over the years from deep acupuncture into the heart, into the lungs, into the nervous system. There have been at least 50 fatalities recorded. So it's not, people say, oh, it's safe, it's safe. It's going to be safe if it's done well. But if it's not done well, it can be dangerous. How else might it be dangerous? Well, say you do acupuncture and you miss an important condition that's not responding to acupuncture, you can miss things. I remember being asked once, yeah, is it a good idea to take homeopathy in severe asthma? Absolutely not. You need hospitalization. You need a drip. You need nebulizers. You need steroids. No, you don't muck about with homeopathy in those conditions. Much too dangerous. And I think it's the same with acupuncture here. Of course, locally, you can get bruising, pain, hematomas, and trauma if you go too deep, like we've already mentioned in the heart and lungs, infections from dirty needles. But it's very rare. 1 in 10 to 100,000 acupunctures, 1 in 10 to 100,000. I'd take those risks. That's extremely tiny. Although, in one Norwegian study, 30% of acupuncturists and 12% of doctors who did it noted some adverse effects. So people are aware, like anything, you can have side effects. So what about for Christians, as we finish? Is it suitable for us? Well, I have to say, this Christian Medical Fellowship article, the guy said no. It's rooted in Taoism. We can't possibly have the Chinese one, which I would agree with. Tao means the way of heaven and earth, the origin of life and death, the principle of everything, the palace of God. In other words, this is replacing the God of the Bible, the creator that we know about, the real way. So, no, absolutely have nothing to do with Chinese acupuncture. What about Western acupuncture? This is more difficult. And again, the CMF doctor came out against it. He feels it leads to confusion and compromise. I don't agree with him. That's why I said I think it's okay for our practice, and I personally have had it done to me because it's not tapping into Eastern religion. It's simply healing in a manner that, to be honest, we don't fully understand. I looked up a paper from last year, and in the last 20 years, there's been loads of research into it. There's a great evidence base. We found that yes, it can affect pain in other ways, affecting how the spinal cord and even above the spinal cord in the brain signals pain, and it definitely does release opioids. It can reduce inflammation that causes pain. We're not at all sure about specific points. We can't prove these things. Although, like I say, I've seen it work. We haven't found out why. That doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means we don't know why. And they did say, to be fair, it seems to be a cheap and a cost-effective method of reducing pain. So lots more, and then all these researchers say that we need more research. So you do research, and then you need more. So it's still ill understood, but it seems to work.
I have lots of thoughts on this actually.
I thought you might have, funny enough.
Yeah, funny. I want to start with massages because when our first son was about to be born, Joe bought me a set of massages as a gift. She thought it'd be quite fun from Baby Bump. So there I was. And I said, but is it okay as massages? Because here's the thing. We would probably think less about having a massage, but there are some massages which are very, very rooted in Eastern religion worship stuff. And so I said to Joe, I'll be sure that this is okay. And she said, yes, it's fine. I guess that's called a Swedish massage, which is just massaging. But we would think less carefully about massaging from a Christian perspective, of whether it's right, wrong, good, bad, all that kind of stuff. But actually, even a simple massage, which is not invasive in that same context, we do need to similarly think, well, is this okay or not?
Yeah, yeah. What would Jesus do? Would he have this massage? I
Yeah.
remember a lovely story I was told of a Christian whose faith was struggling a bit, and he decided one day to queue up to watch a blue film, a pornographic film, and God tapped him on the shoulder, metaphorically, if you like, and said, "Hi, what are you doing here?" We'll call him Bert. "What are you doing here, Bert?" "Oh, just queuing up." Yeah, yeah. Why is that, Bert? You seeing a film? Yes, well, yes, yes, God, yeah, yeah, yeah. "What sort of film is it, Bert?" "Oh, God, you won't want to know." At which point he suddenly realized, hang on a second, what am I doing here? Get out of the queue. And again, I think that it always taught me a lesson. Okay, let's not try and fool God. That's just foolish.
Mm.
And let's not fool ourselves. That's possible. But come on, where are we as Christians? Is this healthy, what we're doing? Because if it's not, walk away. Mm.
I have another thought which I'll come back to, but after I mentioned when I had heart surgery, I was sedated and I had pain relief and stuff going on, and I had a team of people with expensive looking equipment who were messing around inside my heart. I don't know how long that surgeon had been going, but I'm thinking 7 years plus, probably specialized into interior heart surgery and a very specific niche. It's not even all hospitals. I'm thinking probably 10, 12 years before she was actually
Sure.
in someone's heart. Um, and I felt very, very safe with her. I didn't enjoy the procedure, different issue, but she made me feel like, you know what? I know you're qualified. There was anaesthetists and there were other people doing support stuff because it was radio frequency stuff. There was like 4 or 5 people and there was someone looking after me. They all seemed to be very professional and I felt quite secure and safe apart from the surgery, which was not pleasant. But they made me feel like they knew what they were doing because I figured, you know what? I don't need to see your credentials. I think I'm quite certain you've done your degree and you've got qualification in how to do this stuff.
Yeah, indeed. Yes. And that's important. You want a qualified practitioner.
Yes,
Um,
inside my heart. Yes. But sticking a needle in the heart, that just sounds really not wise.
I think that's not wise. And I don't quite understand why. There's 365 points. Why does one have to go in the heart? Stick a needle in somewhere else.
Because isn't the heart kind of moving and pumping? And if you stick a needle in, it's going to rip a hole?
It's not staying still.
No.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, that got me onto another thought, which I've completely forgotten. Just thinking about needles and stuff. But I mean, I guess if you're not careful, it's like anything else. If you get someone who's massaging who's just pummeling away at your back, and they don't know what they're doing, they could quite easily cause damage to your spine, to some of your organs if they're going really, going for it, thinking they're a trained, qualified sports therapist, and they're really not.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And to be fair, with any aspect of medicine, things can go wrong, but you want them to be performed as well as possible.
But my other thought comes back to something we've talked about right early on, and it sort of comes up every so often, not deliberately, but it's about the use of medicine to treat conditions. And the thing is, medicine, when you read the side effects, can be quite terrifying. Thinking, really, this is a side effect?
Even paracetamol, has a list the length of your arm of potential side effects.
Yes,
I have to remember, of course, that these very rarely happen, especially for something as safe as paracetamol, safe in normal doses, that is.
yes, yes.
Other drugs are less clean, as we call them. They're dirtier drugs because the frequency of side effects is much higher, and with chemotherapy, it can be 100%. But it's still worthwhile because the good effects outweigh the bad effects. So you have to weigh these things up, really. And I think acupuncture, used done well, Western acupuncture is an extra, arrow in our quiver, in a sense of things that we can use if people know what they're doing. As I say, personally, I've been on the end of acupuncture, and I've seen it work for that child having eye surgery. Sorry, that adult having eye surgery. Oh my goodness, that's unequivocally worked, no question at all. So, but it just has to be done well.
But I'm just thinking about some of the side effects of medicines, and you take paracetamol, there are certain side effects. You take paracetamol with ibuprofen, probably okay. Take the two of those with something else, and all of a sudden you've got a bit of a mix, and you can start to cause serious problems, which is why we go to doctors who we hope have been trained in how to say it's like mixing bleaches. You don't mix different brands of bleach because you can create all sorts of gases. Well, in the same context, we don't want medicines to do that, but they can have unintended consequences, which makes me think, well, actually, if it's not an Eastern thing, is it going to be actually less of a side effect perhaps than a bunch of drugs which could actually affect your stomach or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, I've had acupuncture done on multiple occasions over the years. Um, I don't know necessarily whether it helped. I'll be completely honest. It certainly didn't harm me in any way, shape, or form.
Which brings me to another one, which is I remember when Jo was pregnant, and you go to the class and they say, this is what you expect when you're having a baby. Here's the maternity ward, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things they said to the dads was, if you are not getting to hospital, your wife is in quite a lot of pain, then one of the things you can do is stroke the inside of the arm or the back of the neck. Because what it does, and you can tell me if I'm wrong in a second, because there's only so much pain receptors in the spine, what you're doing is sending something through the spine, so it's less easily able to detect pain, thus reducing the pain being felt. You're not stopping the pain; you're just preventing the body's ability to transmit those pain signals.
Sure. And that's working on the gate theory and if you like, almost fooling the body. But
Hmm.
of course, there's also the comfort aspect as well as the relieving pain. You're saying I'm with you here.
Yeah,
There's very little else dads can do at that point.
pretty much.
You know, thank goodness that God designed us as we did, because women stomach these things far better than men do, in my
Amen.
experience.
Yes.
But yeah, there's something more than we might think in rubbing an arm. It's not just comfort. There's more to it than that.
But if that, I mean, that's why, I mean, I suppose from the gate control theory is the bit that I have the minimal amount of understanding of from the perspective of having been told by a midwife. One of the things you can do to help reduce pain while you're on the way to hospital or whatever, is to do some stroking on somewhere on the back of the neck or sort of, sensitive points. And it confuses the body just enough to reduce what is being felt as pain. Well, if that can do that, then I can then think, well, a needle might do that. Although personally, needles, I'm quite happy never seeing one ever again.
Indeed, I may not have convinced you to have any acupuncture as yet.
No, no, far from it. I don't like anything. I had a little tiny bit of skin that a doctor took off, and she had the super tiniest needle ever I've seen. And I thought, oh, this isn't so bad. I mean, it still hurt, but it was. Do you know when the doctor says you're going to feel a slight scratch? I felt a slight scratch that day. Normally, it feels like someone's trying to force a hammer through your arm, but that was quite good. But I mean, that was at my level of needles because it was super tiny. But 60 mil, so that's like a few. That's. I mean, that's a lot.
Yes. Oh, sure. Absolutely, it is a lot.
If you've got a needle phobia, this may not be the best one for you. But anyway, I like that we are tackling subjects and saying, well, what's
And
actually
I think
true?
the bigger picture here is this okay for Christians? And we mustn't just assume it's fine because the world says it's fine. Well, is it fine? Let's look into it. So I remember when Sorted magazine, which we both know Steve Flake, who wrote that, and he said to me once when I was doing articles, oh, people have been talking to me about Reiki. Is Reiki all right? And I looked into it and said, Steve, absolutely, it's not all right. This is an Eastern religion. It's absolutely not, not compatible with Christianity. Oh, that's a shame because it's quite popular. It may well be popular. That doesn't make it right. And so I said, no, we are not writing an article on Reiki in a Christian magazine. We mustn't just absorb willy nilly what the world is saying is fine. Let's look into it.
But with everything, there is going to be a source of truth, probably, not necessarily, in what it is. But gate control theory, I understand that one. And also endorphins. You bang your finger and endorphins are released. It never seems to be like they're released quite quick enough or in sufficient
A little
quantity.
bit of a delay.
Yes. But those I can comprehend. So if a needle's doing that, I mean, I'm quite happy. It's fine. You keep
And
needles
of
over
course,
there.
there's more that we're apprehending. So it's good that we can understand a little bit there's plenty more, hence the need for more research of why we don't understand it. And maybe one day these 365 points will be identified, somehow proven to make a difference, and then acupuncture will become even more mainstream.
But please not the heart.
Not the heart. Don't stick it in the heart.
No. No, I had a team of 6 who were inside my heart, and they didn't put any needles anywhere in my heart. Anyway, right, Richard,
Well,
thank you.
They will access your heart from the inside through major blood vessels,
Yes,
rather
they
than
did.
through the skin on the outside, which is a less good idea.
Yes, they went through very carefully through my veins, which
Through your veins, indeed.
whilst not pleasant, I didn't feel much of that at all. So, yes. I guess our advice would be, don't just blindly wander into anything. But actually,
certainly don't do self acupuncture.
No,
unless you absolutely know what you're doing.
No, please don't.
Please don't.
But yes, it's been around a long time. It's easy to think, okay, it's right or wrong, but actually, it is good to understand some of the science and the medical. I think acupuncture immediately I'm thinking, oh, that's terrible. But actually, we're not talking about acupuncture in necessarily the right context. We're talking about Eastern religion acupuncture, which yes, we shouldn't be thinking about as Christians, but needles making a difference. Fascinating, though, 100% of a study didn't have any puncturing from needles and had the same effect.
Interesting. And we know that placebos, when somebody takes a drug which they think is doing X and is just, a sugar pill, has an effect in quite a high percentage of people. The mind has such a role to play in pain, as in other areas of life.
Which is why the Bible says, take every thought captive.
Very true.
Right. Richard, thank you. I was fascinated, as ever. Some of the details are really interesting. I would have thought it was in the UK a lot longer, but I mean, you're talking about mid-17th century, 1850, The Lancet, which is the medical journal that's been written about. So, as a thing, it's been around a long time, but it is good to be informed to make our own decisions. This is one of the things I am really passionate about. Don't just say, yes, this is good. No, this is bad. I mean, a bit like massage. Some massages are good. Some maybe not so.
Yeah. And as Christians, we're called to have knowledge. So
Yes.
we're called to have knowledge of the world out there, and of course, knowledge of the scriptures. And then you can put the two together.
Amen. Richard, thank you. If you've got any thoughts on acupuncture, and I suspect you might, if you've got any thoughts on acupuncture is good or bad, then you can let Richard know and he will answer your questions. Hello at pure247radio.org. Hello at pure247radio.org. If you've got any questions for Dr. Richard Scott, GP, thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Did you know Pure 24/7 Radio has a shop? Well, we do. You can buy merchandise while supporting the work that we do here. Simply head over to www.pure247radio.org/shop. That's www.pure247radio.org/shop.